Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
Celebrating the American story is more than fireworks and festivals. The nation's 250th anniversary is a time for reflecting on legacy and what it means to be American and, well, the future of America. The nation's bicentennial in 1976 was more than fireworks and celebrations. It was also a milestone year when people turned their thoughts to the past and to the future. For President Gerald Ford, the bicentennial was an unprecedented opportunity to heal and unite the country after the tumultuous years of Vietnam, the Watergate scandal, and President Nixon's unprecedented abuse of power and a decade of assassinations and riots. He tasked his cabinet and challenged Congress to use the bicentennial as a catalyst for uniting the country. Ford saw his loss to Jimmy Carter by a mere 2% as another opportunity to bring the nation together. Rather than contest the election, he immediately invited Carter to the White House and instructed his staff to ensure a cooperative transition that was be as, well, seamless as possible. That was an act that Carter, the media, and members of Congress later praised for healing the nation. That's in stark contrast to the elections of 1876 or even 2020. Celebrating the American story and uniting the country during the nation's centennial in 1876 was even more challenging. This was little more than a decade after the Civil War and the assassination of President Lincoln, and the presidential election was almost as contentious as the one in 2020. Democrat Samuel Tilden won the popular vote, but when the votes were counted, Tilden appeared to have 184 electoral votes, one short of the 185 needed to win, while Republican Rutherford B. Hayes held 166. That, however, was only one crisis that came from the election. Although the 15th Amendment had prohibited states from discriminating by race when making voting laws in the former Confederate states, gerrymandering and other restrictions had been implemented. As a result, there were claims of intimidation of voters and election fraud. Unlike with the election in 2020, there was evidence of both. A period known today as Reconstruction had commenced after the Civil War. Between 1865 and 1877, 3 new constitutional amendments, as well as federal programs like the Freedmen's Bureau, created a diverse array of opportunities for the former slaves. This included educational, professional, and political. In addition, the federal government had required that the states, which had seceded from the United States to form the breakaway Republic of Confederate States of America, ratify the 13th and 14th Amendments in order to rejoin the Union. Some states were also required to ratify the 15th Amendment. Reconstruction was effective for only a brief period of time. As an example, how successful Reconstruction initiatives were, nearly 2,000 black men served in elected positions during this time. By the early 1870s, a power coalition of white conservative Democrats had regained dominating control in all former Confederate states but Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan used violence and intimidation to reverse the progress of Reconstruction programs. At one point, to enforce Reconstruction laws, President Ulysses S. Grant had stationed federal troops in the former Confederacy. The implementation of martial law fueled political tensions between the political parties, and so by 1876, there was extreme racial polarization in almost all the former Confederate states. These issues were compounded in 1873 with a severe economic recession. The country faced the worst financial crisis since its founding. Widespread unemployment fueled further divisions. Some politicians seized the opportunity to deflect the focus from failed policies to immigrants. A precipitous decline in cotton prices hampered post-war economic recovery in the former Confederacy. The fact and fiction of rampant corruption in the administration of President Ulysses S. Grant created political divisions. In 1874, this also played a major role in control of the House of Representatives being regained by Democrats for the first time since the Civil War. As a result, the presidential election of 1876 took place in a tinderbox. Things were made worse when, with the backing of the Republican Party, presidential candidate Ohio Governor Rutherford B. Hayes challenged the votes in Oregon, Louisiana, Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina, states governed by Republican majorities. The claim was made that Democrats had tampered with the ballots, specifically in districts dominated by a heavy African American population. At stake were 20 electoral votes. So Republicans initiated a campaign with claims that the popular vote counts in contested states were tainted by ballot stuffing as well as intimidation of voters. In those states, investigations were launched, and within a few weeks, the votes in entire districts were declared invalid for polling misconduct. The revised vote counts gave Hayes clear majorities in the popular vote. The Democratic Party, however, had reason to believe that the investigation and recount was corrupt, and so Tilden and his allies refused to accept the new count. This resulted in an unprecedented constitutional crisis, as two slates of electors were certified in multiple states. This would lead Congress to reform the electoral process with passage of the Electoral Count Act of 1887. In an effort to avert a national crisis and to unify the country, President Grant signed a law that established a bipartisan election commission. It was composed of 10 members of Congress and 4 Supreme Court justices. As might be expected, the commission was evenly split along party lines. So, to avoid a deadlock, the participating Supreme Court justices were asked to choose a 5th justice. That justice would be given the power of tie-breaking votes. Justice David Davis was the original selection, as he was well known for avoiding any indication of party affiliation. However, he declined and chose to run for election to the Senate in Illinois. Justice Joseph Bradley agreed to serve, and after considerable deliberation, Justice Bradley voted with the Commission's Republicans on all issues. As a result, Rutherford B. Hayes was awarded the 20 disputed electoral votes, and that allowed him to win the election by 1 electoral vote. When nominated as the Republican candidate for president, Hayes had pledged to bring the blessings of honest and capable local self-government to the southern states if elected. Many people read between the lines and felt that Hayes was pledging to end the unpopular Reconstruction initiatives and programs. While the Electoral Commission deliberated on a solution for the contested presidential election, national party leaders were meeting in secret to work out a framework and details for what would become known as the Compromise of 1877. Democrats would not dispute Hayes' election. It was also agreed that the civil rights of African Americans would be honored. Then, during the Hayes administration, the compromise led to the withdrawal of federal intervention in the former Confederate states. Historians today point to the contested election and the compromise as the end of the Reconstruction era. The pledge to uphold black citizens' rights was quickly abandoned, and in many southern states, laws were passed to reverse Reconstruction policies. As a result, often through intimidation and violence, black voters were disenfranchised and racial segregation became the rule of the land. This system would remain in place until the birth and rise of the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. As the History Guy says, that's a great YouTube channel, by the way, history deserves to be remembered. That is especially true when it comes to the history of American elections. As we prepare to celebrate the nation's 250th anniversary, take time to reflect on the complicated, tragic, inspiring, fascinating, and complex American story. Find inspiration in the leaders that work to unite the nation. Study our historic shortcomings and how we resolve them, as they are the milestones in our journey toward manifestation of the lofty goals of the Declaration of Independence. Sharing America's story. It's what we do here at Jim Hinckley's America.
Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.